Hi, namaste, and welcome to Breakout with me, Abha. We are talking about making and breaking rules here. As you know, we are committed to bring to you exceptional change makers, the thought transformers, the people who've been there, done that, the mavericks, the movers and shakers. And guess what? These people have agreed to share with us and demystify this whole process, the rules game, so that we can break out of what we find limiting and break into something that we find necessary for ourselves. From the greats like this, we have learned that there is only one rule to life, that is, there are no rules to life. We make them up all on the way. It's all figure outable. And you know what? We keep it absolutely real over here. Now, my guest today is an exceptional lady. You can see her on my right on the screen over here. I'm going to tell you who she is. Some of you might probably know who she already is. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's an entrepreneur, she's a Forbes columnist, and she is a revolutionary of sorts. So she's the author of Their Roaring 30s, a breakthrough book for women over 30, and in that space where she said she found a gap and she thought she must address this gap because women at 30 have some things to tell the world, and she took that up upon herself to be that voice. And then she is the founder and CEO of Girl Talk, and which amplifies voices of girls and women to give them a platform to reignite their voices, to redefine their power. And she has been, she's a Forbes columnist. She is also a very good teacher. She's a mentor to lots and lots of women. She is the executive producer and the visionary behind the inaugural Forbes Women's Summit, and she's done just about everything. So please welcome Denise Restauri. Denise, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. So thank you. I'm always about sharing stories. So.
Oh, I know. I forgot to say you were a storyteller. Yes, Denise is also a storyteller. So Denise, let me just ask you the first question, because you've done so much. You've been there, done that. You've seriously been there, done that. You are like this breakout specialist and expert who knows breaking out of stuff like the back of her hand. So tell me where you started. What sort of drove you to this point, and anything that you want to share? I mean, tell us the stories. We love to hear stories. So tell us all those stories with where you started out and what's your background, what were you doing earlier, because I understand you were a media person and now what you're doing is amazing, out of this world. So over to you.
Well, thank you. Now, I'm going to tell you my breakout story, starting with a story about 15 years ago. I broke out way before then. But I was living in Washington, D.C., and my then 7-year-old daughter and I came to New York for a visit. I live in New York now, but I wasn't living here then. And we were standing in front of the window at Barney's, the department store, and they had this great, the windows, the display was just beautiful. And I said to my little daughter, she's 7, standing next to me in her little fake fur red coat. I will never forget the image of her little black Mary Jane. And I said, you know, honey, you can be anything you want to be. If you wanted to be a fashion designer, you could do that. Or you could say, I want to be a fashion designer, but maybe that's not exactly what I want to do. I'm really creative. I really would like to be the window dresser who does these windows at Barney's. And my daughter's looking at me with that, like, what are you talking about look on her face, when she's now 22 and she has perfected Viola. I'm like, what are you talking about, Mom? Look. And I thought, I'm not talking to her. I'm speaking to myself. I'm talking to myself when I was the 15-year-old. My daughter was 7. Because I grew up in a really small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And girls didn't really go to college. The boys went to college. If I have an older brother, he went to Yale University, because the idea was the boys are going to be the breadwinners and the girls are going to get married and stay at home. People have asked me, are you upset with your parents about that? And no, I'm not upset with that. going on in the outside world. And most books were about history. They weren't about current women, what they were doing, the jobs they had. Gloria Steinem's a few years older than I am, so she was that role model for me, being the feminist, bringing out a feminist. But I didn't know what I wanted to be. So that was always, I knew I wanted to do something, but what is it that I want to do? I'm a real believer, if you can see it, you can be it.
Right.
But I had nothing to see. And I had a great role model. My mom was wonderful, and she was a wonderful mom. But wanting to have that career track, I didn't have anyone as a mentor to really help guide me through. So I got to where I am accidentally. And accidentally in that I didn't have a plan, but on purpose, because I always believed I always wanted to do the next thing. And I wasn't afraid to go try it. So I was 19, I was in college, I was a little bored, dropped out of college and moved. I was in my small little town. I graduated from high school when I was 17, been working for 2 years, and I moved to Washington, D.C. I came there without a job, no job. But I thought, I'll get one when I get there. So I became a secretary, and I worked, and one day my boss comes out, and I worked for this company called Honeywell, and he says, if you don't go get a job somewhere else, I'm going to fire you because you're way too talented for this job. Because I wasn't a good secretary. I was like, I really was kind of pathetic. So anyway, but he said, but I'll keep you. It's not that he wasn't fired because I was bad. He was like, you just have way more talent than this job has, so go find something. And so that was, I'm very thankful for him that he gave me that, you can do more. You don't need to be doing this.
Right.
So one thing led to another. I took a job as a junior lobbyist on Capitol Hill. I was 22 years old. I had not a clue what I was doing, not a clue. But that differs how many jobs I've taken, that the first day I went to work, I really didn't know what the job was. But it was like, what's the worst that could happen? I don't like it, I'll go find another job. And that's how I ended up at USA Today and stayed there. I was there for 16 years. I became vice president, was vice president of sales for 9 of those years. And they were some of the most formative years for me in business. I worked for 2 wonderful women, Carolyn Bivens is her name now, and Janet Costello is her name now, Janet Smith. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they really were my mentors. I just didn't see it at the time. I didn't call them a mentor. I called them my boss. But they really were my mentors. The 3 of us were together. We had each other's backs constantly. And that's something I hear from a lot of young women these days. And I see it with myself, too, with women my own age, right? We don't have each other's backs all the time. And it's like, we've got to switch that. That's got to change. Right. We really do need to have each other's back. And that doesn't mean that Carolyn and Janet and I agreed on everything, because we didn't. But that was behind closed doors. To the world, we were undivided. It was like you attacked one of us, you attack all 3 of us. And nobody really wanted to go there, right? So, and that was how I look at those 16 years at USA Today were some of the most rewarding years for me. And my daughter is adopted, and I will tell you that story as far as a story of getting through the bad times in life. And when she was 7, I decided I didn't want to work full time anymore, that I didn't want to travel. I was divorced. I wanted to be with her more. I thought, I still want to work, but I don't want to be a mom that in 10 years from now looks back and says, what was my daughter like when she was 8? I wanted to be present. And I don't have to be there every moment, but I wanted to be present. I didn't want to be traveling as much as I had been traveling. So I left USA Today, and I was also bored. After 16 years, it was like, I'm done now. And I left USA Today, and I had a contract with a startup company, and it went under a year later. And I really didn't know what to do, so I had to reinvent myself. And that was a struggle. That was really, really hard. What happens, I think, when you're venturing out to be an entrepreneur, everyone tells you these stories of glory, right? It's so great. You don't have to be at the office. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. What they don't tell you is you can't pay your mortgage or you can't pay your rent half the time. And I wish they would have told me that. So going into it, I would have had more eyes wide open, but that wasn't the case. So there were a lot of hard lessons, and that was 15 years ago that I've been an entrepreneur now for 15 years. In those startup years of not really really doing things the right way, not understanding everything the right way, and really learning that. And so I try to give those learnings, pass those learnings on now to women and men, and saying, I'm all for being an entrepreneur. I think it's wonderful. But you really need to, it's like when you decide to have a child, I think it's wonderful, I'm all for it.
Right.
But this is the real story. This cute little baby isn't always a cute little baby when they're 12, 13, 14, whatever. And that's great. We all go through it. But don't have a child because you want a cute little baby. Don't become an entrepreneur because you want to stay at home and work in your sweats. There are other reasons to make those right decisions.
Right. I love that attitude. Love that attitude. When I'm hearing this, where was that breakthrough? I mean, when did that breakthrough come to you where you really sort of realized, okay, yeah, this is where I am supposed to be. This is the right place. And this is what I'm meant to do.
I've had a couple of those moments in life. But the most recent ones were, if you look at being an entrepreneur, it's when I launched Girlquake. So prior to Girlquake, I had all these little startups. That's how I got involved in the young world, the young women's world, about 15 years ago. And I look at it now, and I have a wonderful husband who's very supportive, and who always says to me, this was all a part of your journey. Because sometimes I look back and say, I really failed in those first years. And he's like, no, you didn't fail. That was part of where you got to now. You had to kind of go through that.
Yes.
Because of that, I got into the women's space very authentically. I just didn't jump in. I've been there for the past 15 years, growing and learning and understanding and listening to what people were actually saying and feeling. And so the breakthrough, I think, is with Girlquake. And here's why I say that. I was working in the young women's space, and I held events for them. So young, like 8 to 12 years old. I would bring 250 little girls from around the country together. Their moms had a different room to have a meeting. And one day at this meeting, these 250 girls, I partnered with Disney, and they would bring in their stars. And the girls were just like, yay, everybody's here. But what really moved them was when I put young women who were changing the world on stage. That's when the young girls got up and looked at these other young girls who were like 16, a little older than them, and saw what they were doing to change the world.
Right. And
you could see that spark in their eyes that said, I can be her. I can go back to my community, and I can do what she's doing.
Brilliant.
And they did.
Yes, brilliant.
And then my second breakthrough was during those same meetings that I once brought 50 power women in with the young women to have a luncheon. And the young women in this case were 16, 17, and 18. And I think my expectation was the young women would leave and they would be like, oh my God, I met so-and-so, and to connect them into their networks.
Sure.
And that happened. But what happened also was the power women left and said, holy cow, I met this young girl who's 16 years old, who's combating sex trafficking, and they were just blown away.
Right.
How smart these young women were. So that's how I created Girlquake, and saying, we need to amplify the voices of young women who aren't celebrities, but they should be celebrities.
Right.
Because what they're doing, and celebrities are great. They're great for what they do, but they aren't always the best role models.
Right.
And they're two different, they are celebrities, they're entertainers, and they're great at what they do. And many are great role models, but not all of them are.
Yes.
So it's like we have to put better role models in front of us. Right. So that was a real breakthrough for me as far as deciding what I want to do and finding my real true passion in life. Because I learned so much from the women I interview. I'm sure you feel, it's like because you get to their worlds, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I learn as much as I'm passing along.
Now, I'm getting goosebumps when I'm listening to this because I've never had mentors myself. But, I did get opportunities to go out and see some people. And I felt, my God, this is possible. So they taught you possibilities. So I am sort of amazed at what you're doing now. So this is your book, The Roaring 30s. I mean, you're an expert at finding gaps and then finding what to do with those gaps. So this is where you found another gap in the 30 age group, and where everybody was talking about, the media doesn't cover them the way they're living, and they have something to offer. So you picked that up and made it your mission at that point of time to bring that out to the world. So your book, The Roaring 30s, brutally honest career talk from women who beat the youth trap. Love that title because at 30 was I lost? I was kind of half lost.
Right.
Half lost, raising children and following a purpose, but still a little bit not in the right space. So tell me more about that book.
I came up with the idea, as you said, because I looked at it and said, at Forbes, they have the Forbes 30 under 30, which is fabulous. And then a friend of mine, two friends of mine, have the 40 over 40 list. Women in their 40s, 40 women over 40 are selected every year, and I was delighted to be honored. I am a 40 over 40. But it was looking at what is happening in that 30-year-old age group. And I was the executive producer of, as you said, of the first Forbes Women's Summit. And as I was preparing for the summit, I was speaking with the first and only female president of MIT, Susan Hochfeld, and I was saying to her, she said to me, "Can I help you with programming for the summit?" And I was very thankful for that offer. And I said, we have a lot of women under 30 and a lot of women in their 40s to put on stage and tell their stories. But I have a gap in this 30-year-old, that 30 decade. And she said something, these are not her exact words, but she said basically, that's dangerous because when the media is skipping a decade,
right.
Who do the 20-somethings look up to? They fast forward because they're hearing stories of women in their 40s. Right. And they think that's what they're supposed to be doing in their 30s. But that's not what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
So one night, I was writing an article for Forbes, and I was researching women. I wanted to write about women in their 30s, and I thought, who can I write about? And it was 1 o'clock in the morning here, and I was tired, and I thought, what, I'm going to Google and come up with some names, and I'll go into my database of women I know. But let me just have that Google search really spark that for me. And I went into Google, and all I saw about women in 30s were about women in dating. Nothing about women doing great. Now, we can debate my Google search. I'm not bragging on Google here. Right. My Google search maybe could have been better, but it made me think, really? I mean, aren't women in their 30s? I know women in their 30s are doing more than looking for a date.
Right.
And that's how it all started with, how do we get their stories out? So women in their 20s know what's coming up. Women in their 30s, and many of the women in the book said this, they wanted to be a part of the book because they wanted to read about other women to see, are they normal? Because all they really had were their friends to see what's normal, what's not.
Exactly.
And for all of us to be able to say what's going on in that decade, because it's such a critical decade.
Right.
It was one of my most critical decades.
Sure.
One of my most life-changing decades.
Right. I think, yeah. So when I've got that book, and I read some of the interviews there and some of the people who've been talking about their stories. So how much I understand that you're greatly influenced by your dad also as a storyteller, because the book has been done in a very, very powerful way in the way women have told their stories. But I think the way you've got your input over there, it's very interesting. So is it your skill? Because I've read your articles. I think I got hooked to your articles at one point because you bring in such interesting people and you talk about the deepest stuff that needs to be talked about or told to the world. It's interesting to read that. So how much of your influence from your family in trying to understand this, or in your background, or in your mentors, from your mentors, with your friends, how much of that did you bring into that book? Because it's a very, very powerful book.
Thank you. I started at the beginning of the book bringing myself into it, but I did that for two reasons. One is I learned as I was interviewing the women for the book that, and this was not done with intent. I didn't say like, how do I get their stories? Here's what I'll do. This was not calculated. But because we were having conversations, I would tell them my stories. And I think you then have this personal relationship because they look at you and say, wow, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position, so to speak, and telling your story that is personal and private. And I really believe that we have to share those stories because if we don't, we're never going to learn. And as women, as men, as everyone, we need to share the stories, the good and the bad. They don't have to be all failure stories, right? But and that takes me into what I was saying earlier was one of my most devastating moments in life is I start the book off with this story in that I found my daughter in the classified ads section of a tiny little newspaper. And that happened because a young woman a 30-something woman told me her story. And that story goes that I had trying to get pregnant under infertility treatment for 7 years unsuccessfully and decided to do adoption. And there was open adoption wasn't a big thing then, meaning that you would know the birth parents. This was 22 years ago. I kind of wanted this little baby to appear in my life and not know anything about the past, the parents, nothing. It was like, I want him or her to be mom. And then I learned a lot more and thought, well, as a person, don't you really want to know where you came from? So maybe by knowing the birth parents, I can help my child as they get older understand who are they genetically.
Right.
So that was a big thing for me, and I want to pass on. I like to pass on to everyone is sometimes you got to get over where you're at, get the knowledge to understand that there are better ways than what you really believe.
Always.
So, anyways, we went to this agency, and a very reputable agency, and they said, we have this birth mother who's never going to pick you because she already wants a family. She wants a family with 2 kids to bring her child into that family. You don't have kids, so she can't pick you. But just go in, talk to this young woman and see what it's like, the process is like. So we did that, and the birth mother picked us to be her parents of her child, even though we didn't have 2 children. So things were going great. We get the call. She's in the hospital. She's delivering. My husband and I run up. We're in D.C. She's in Baltimore. It's about an hour away. We get there, and things are falling apart. Boyfriend comes in, and they're now going to keep. After we have the baby for 2 days, they take the baby back.
Okay.
And I was devastated. Devastated. Because you really are losing a child.
Right.
This is, you're losing a hope and a dream. Right. And although you're only there for 2 days, even if you gave natural birth, it's a loss in your life.
It's already part of you, yes.
Yeah. So I was just devastated. And we were supposed to be going to a party to celebrate the birth of this child with the agency, but I had no child. So I was like, I'm not going. And the agency was very understanding. And that day, I thought, we're going to go. I'm going to go to this party. And at that party, I met a woman who was in her 30s, who had her baby. He was about 6 months old. And I said to her, we were talking, and she had a fall through also. She had lost her first child. And I said, so how did you find the child that you have now? And she said, well, I put an ad in the Penny Saver, which is a magazine. It's like a little publication of classified ads. So it could be, get a refrigerator, and underneath that, it could be, I have a baby. It could be anything. It could be gift dog. So I thought, she said, you're going to think I'm crazy. But I put an ad in the Penny Saver, and I thought, well, I'm not going to judge you. I don't think you're crazy. But I do think it's crazy that we're doing this now, that we have to put ads in the Penny Saver. So I go back. I'm working at USA Today. I have this very busy job, and I make a commitment to myself. I'm working with a high-powered adoption attorney. I'm working with the agency, and I said, I'm going to do something every day to be proactive to make this happen. But I'm not going to spend more than 20 minutes every day. I won't let this become my life. But every day I'm going to do something. So one day, about a week before Christmas, I'm out of things to do. And I think, and I have 5 minutes, if this is a true story, I have to get to a meeting. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to get to a meeting, I have to do something. And this story comes to my head about the Penny Saver. So I call the Penny Saver. We didn't have the internet then. Right? So I called the Penny Saver. And I want to put an ad in the paper. And the guy's like, well, we have a special, a 2-week special. And I'm like, fine, whatever it is, just take my credit card and just process. I got to get to a meeting. He said, but no one's going to call you over the holidays. And I'm like, I don't care. Just put the ad in the paper. I don't care. Christmas Eve day, I get a phone call from a woman who happens to be now my daughter's birth grandmother, who says, my daughter is 7 months pregnant. I didn't know she was pregnant. She wasn't showing. And I saw your ad in the Penny Saver a week ago. I was looking for a dog for my daughter, to buy her a dog for Christmas. And your ad was right above the ad for the dog. And I noticed it because your name is Denise, and her godmother's name is Denise. And I thought, oh, that's sad. People want children and can't have them. And I put the Penny Saver away. Yesterday, I found out my daughter was pregnant. And I thought, there's a reason I saw that ad.
Wow.
And that person that wasn't born then is now my daughter.
Wow. Whoa. It's goosebumps again. So you are a great storyteller. Lovely. I really, so this is, congratulations to you. Like your daughter, you said, is 22 now, but I think it's 22 years of joy. I think I can see the joy in your face. I can see you almost about, I think you probably might cry now I might if I hear the story. So okay, very 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 nice. So tell me, Denise, you're doing a series with Forbes, right? As a Forbes columnist, I have read lots and lots of your articles. Very interesting stuff. What is that series called, and what exactly is it? Where is it going? I mean, what
Yes.
exactly is it supposed to do?
Yes. Okay. So it's called Mentoring Moments.
Okay.
And once again, I look at the gaps in the, not look at them, they just kind of hit me in the face, and I'm like, okay, so we got to do something about this. I was at a dinner one night, and there were 20 powerful women at the dinner, all with a C title of some sort, mostly with large corporation C titles,
Right.
and talking about mentoring young women. But unfortunately, that was a great conversation. Unfortunately, the majority of them were saying they don't have time to mentor young women, which really irritated me because I was like, but you have time to come to this dinner with other powerful women, but you don't have time to mentor a young woman. Then I quit being irritated and thought, why? And I think it's because, these are my thoughts, one is you think that you're not benefiting from young people, that you think if you go to a dinner with power women, you can help each other, you'll benefit, and you're not seeing the benefits that younger women bring into your world. And so you're not putting the value of that. You think it's a one-way street. It's all about you giving, but that's not the case.
Right.
So then I thought, that's a battle that I don't really know if I'm ever going to win in fighting because it's hard to change minds of people one at a time. So how do I reverse that, and how do we get messages from all women? How do we expand the platforms of mentoring? Because we all have more than one mentoring story we can share, right? So how do I get your mentoring story, and put them out there? And so since I'm a contributor for Forbes, it was a natural in saying we'll start this series of women writing their mentoring moment, a story about something that has happened in their life that they want to share with the world. Can be personal, can be business, that everyone can learn from. Right. So I launched in December, and it's been a great success.
Yes, I know.
Stories are great. And the stories are great. I mean, so it's a real learning. And this month I'll post probably anywhere from 5 to 10 more, and we're continuing on. And soon to do some podcasts as well.
Oh, superb. That sounds great. So this is, I'm looking forward to the podcast because I am reading what you're writing. So I think this is going to be real fun. If you've gone through a lot of stuff, and you have broken out of a lot of stuff. If I could bring you back to the theme of the show here, what would you advise to your younger self? If you were to look back and say, okay, what would Denise do differently now if she was 15 now? What would she have done differently?
I would have not developed the imposter syndrome, meaning how did I get here?
Right.
I'm very smart. I don't say that to be egotistic, but I'm very smart. I think that I'm creative. I can be a visionary. I'm talented. So it's not like I don't think I'm good enough. But I dropped out of college at a time when dropping out of college wasn't a cool thing to do. I mean, now it's like a badge of honor, right? I dropped out of Harvard, so therefore I could.
Every big guy has dropped out of college, right? So
right.
I've been wrong. I went through college, so I feel now that I've been a stupid fool. I should have dropped out of college.
Right. When I dropped out of college, it wasn't like the cool factor.
Right.
Out. So that lived with me for a long, and I was always honest when I went on interviews. I wasn't lying about it. But that lived with me. And when I was at USA Today, I was vice president, and we were hiring a lot of our new hires in the sales department had their master's degrees.
Right.
And that was, I kept thinking, if ever I leave USA Today, where will I ever get a job? Because I don't have a master's degree. Now, keep in mind, I have taken probably more classes. I probably have my PhD at this point, if I took the amount of credits I've accumulated over my lifetime. And even at USA Today, we would do these 1-week courses where they would bring professors in from Harvard and MIT, and we would do master classes in business and all that. But in my head, there was always this thing, I didn't go to college. So when it really hit me is when I was thinking about leaving USA Today, but wondering, and I had a contract for a startup to work with a startup company, because I was very intrigued with this. This was 15 years ago. A young woman had top of her class at MIT doing a startup. I was like, I want to do that. Because USA Today was really a startup in the beginning.
Right.
We were, just didn't know we were. So it was, it's saying, I want to be a part of this world. And I said I had a psychiatrist, a therapist at the time, And I had said to her, but I'm afraid of quitting USA Today. And she said, why? I said, because I don't have a degree. And she said, okay, you are one of the most marketable people I've met in my entire life. You have to get over this now. You can, if this job doesn't work, you will get a job somewhere else. And that for me was a breakthrough.
Right.
And I don't know why, that just hearing her say, you are one of the most marketable people I know, you've got to get over this now. She said, this is really hindering your life.
Right.
And she said to me, and if you don't get over it, then don't come back. Because everything we've worked on is not working. You've got to get over this.
Sure.
I'm going to help. She wasn't like just saying, yeah. And that was my breakthrough of saying, I'm not an imposter. I've earned everything. And through working through it, figuring out, when I looked at everything I had done, I had worked really hard. I learned, I studied, I researched, I did everything to get to where I was going. Nobody handed me anything. I had some breaks. As I said, the two women I worked with, I tell this story to this day that when I got promoted to vice president, I was like, really, me? I wasn't ready. But as Carolyn says, she said, in your mind, you weren't ready.
Right.
Ready.
Yes.
I didn't think. But who is ready? That's the other thing. When you're looking for promotion, I wasn't even looking for a promotion. Right. But when you're wanting to do well, you're not always ready.
Sure.
But you have to show the signs that you can take it on.
Right. I think that's yourself is always in a state of, until you get to a point where you can define yourself. I think you're still in that state where you're not sure whether this is for you, whether you're ready, whether you're not. So, and the path is this way. So this is, I'm sure you've earned every bit of it. I think you're amazing, and you're definitely marketable. I can see the smile on your face. I think you're one of the most powerful persons I'm talking to just now, because I've talked to a lot of women, a lot of men, and they all have this, inherent something about themselves, which is so powerful that you really don't need to define them in any way whatsoever. So you're one of those people. So I love that about you. And your legacy. So I bring you to the end of this particular episode. What do you think you want to leave behind now? After doing all this much, you're mentoring people, you're teaching, you're a lecturer, you're a professor, you're out there giving it out to the world. So I would believe there's a legacy out there hidden inside you. So if I were to tell you, okay, Denise, there is a legacy there, come on, let's hear about it, what would that be?
I think really doing what I'm doing right now and giving young women the platform. So, on my tombstone, what do I want it to read? Hopefully something great from my daughter. That's the most important thing to me, being a wonderful mom and wife. But on the legacy of what I'm doing in the work world and my career is that giving young women the opportunity to really shine and letting everyone be as good as, and helping them. I'm not letting them, but helping them be as good as they can be.
Right.
And really bringing truly women of generations embracing each other. Those are the things I really want to, as my career, as I get older, and I want to be able to look back and say, if nothing else I've done, those are the things I want to have done.
Oh, they will have tons to talk about when you look back. So thank you very much, Denise. This is Denise Restauri talking to us about her journey, her stories, and what she's doing for women. She is wonderful, and she has been working so hard to amplify voices of girls and women, to give them the opportunity to shine, to redefine their power, to redefine their impact. So Denise, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to connect with you soon. And for everyone, please find Denise either on the Forbes, because she's a contributor there. You can find her on Google. Just go there, you'll find her there. And girlquake.com, that's your website, right? And her book, Their Roaring 30s. Their Roaring 30s, brutally honest career talk from women who beat the... I love that tagline. It's a great tagline. So we're going to talk about that tagline next time. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to see you once again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.